welcome to my look at London. It is, of course, one of the world's greatest cities. It is a double capital. It's the capital of both England and of the United Kingdom. But it's also a city within a city, because we have the City of London, which is just 1 square mile in area, sitting within Greater London. So when I talk of the City of London, I will be referring to that very small 1 mile area. If I'm referring to the whole metropolis, I'll either say Greater London or probably just London. In 55 BC, Julius Caesar's Roman army crossed the English Channel at its narrowest point. They marched northwards until they found a wide river surrounded by green fields. A few tribes were living along it. Those first Romans were forced out by Queen Boudicca and her tribe of Iceni. By the time of the second Roman invasion, 88 years later, the area had become a small port and a merchant community. The Romans bridged the water. They built their administrative headquarters on the north bank. Nobody really knows why they chose to call it Londinium. There are all sorts of theories. But it became their new capital in the Provincia Britannia, replacing Colchester, which had been capital until that point. That ancient core, the Roman city, is still called the City of London, largely retains those medieval boundaries, as I said, just 1 square mile. But the name London today covers a much bigger metropolis that surrounds it. And actually, if we say the city, as in somebody works in the city, it means the City of London, or it actually means they work in the financial sector in a generic sense. After Roman rule collapsed, an Anglo-Saxon settlement grew slightly to the west of that original city, and that became a major port. This would be attacked by the Vikings on several occasions. By 820, the Vikings had the upper hand and the town began to decline once more. And the Vikings would eventually control a huge tranche of England, as you can see in red on this map here. Alfred the Great refounded London in 886, and the original city inside the Roman wall revived in life and trade once more. It would soon be the largest city in the country, and the obvious choice for capital by the time of the Norman conquest in 1066. William the Conqueror was crowned King William I at Westminster Abbey, one of the greatest churches in Europe at the time. He ordered the building of the Tower of London to intimidate the natives and to provide a place of safety if needed. In the Tudor period, the port grew on exports of woolen cloth to the Low Countries, but not really any further afield than that. It wasn't until the middle of the 16th century that the Royal Exchange had been founded, and monopolies like the East India Company were established to trade in a much wider area, the whole new world. Population would grow from 50,000 to 225,000 people in just 75 years. And the city was still very compact, so it was very cramped and unhygienic, of course. Civil war broke out in 1642 when the mercantile classes demanded that some of the monarch's powers should be passed to Parliament. Under Oliver Cromwell, the Puritans outlawed simple pleasures like dancing and theatres, so no wonder the return of the monarchy under Charles II was warmly welcomed in 1660. But disaster was on the horizon. Population had continued to grow. It had reached 500,000, but a quarter of those would die in an outbreak of the Black Death in 1665. As the plague was reaching its natural end, the Great Fire of London broke out in a bakery in Pudding Lane in the city. It quickly swept through the old wooden buildings. Much of the original city was destroyed. It would take a decade to rebuild it, with St. Paul's Cathedral being the crowning glory. Now, we call that the Great Fire of London, but in fact only a handful of people died in that. Sadly, a much more recent fire killed many more people when a tower block caught fire in June this year. You may have seen that on the news. In the Georgian era, the city expanded rapidly with lavish architecture, elegant squares and beautiful houses for the prosperous merchants. New bridges were built across the river, which helped South London to develop too. In 1761, George III bought Buckingham House. He developed it into a palace fit for the monarch. At the time, London was dogged by crime, and so the Bow Street Runners were established as the first professional police force. But conditions for the working classes were very poor. Most children born would die before reaching the age of 3. During Queen Victoria's reign, it grew to be the world's biggest city. The increasing population, of course, brought challenges in terms of housing and managing diseases. Rising traffic congestion led to the development of the world's first underground railway system in 1863. London would suffer heavy bombings in both world wars. New buildings were hastily erected, but many proved to be badly designed and not fit for purpose. In 1951, the Festival of Britain was held on the south bank of the river. And the following year, the Great Smog would lead to the Clean Air Act. This ended the pea soup fogs for which London had been notorious. That was when it earned its nickname, the Big Smoke. From the 1960s, it became a centre for the worldwide youth culture centred around the King's Road, Chelsea and Carnaby streets. I spoke of the troubles in Belfast, but they were felt here too, as the IRA carried out many attacks. And just as Liverpool saw riots, London did too around the same time in areas like Brixton, which were hounded by racial inequality. Today, as I said, London refers to a big area, so it includes that original small city of London and the 32 boroughs of Greater London. It is a city of 9 million people, a cosmopolitan mix. They say there are 300 languages spoken here. Now, I told you a few days ago that a person born in Liverpool would be called a Scouser, or somebody born in London is called a Cockney. Actually, you have to be born within earshot of Bow Bells, which was one of the original churches in the old city. So to be a true Cockney, it's a very small area that you were born in. Today, this is the world's most visited city in terms of visitor numbers. It's truly global in so many ways, and the only city to have hosted the Summer Olympics on 3 occasions. So where do I start in this huge city? I've only got 40 minutes, so you're going to have to hold on to your hats. There are 140 museums, 850 art galleries, numerous famous buildings and 1 million stories to tell. So I decided I would start with William the Conqueror's castle, the Tower of London. I'm then going to move upriver towards the city, and then eventually we will reach Westminster, which is very much our royal London and our political heart too. So William's original castle had been hastily built in wood, but within just 30 years this stone building had been added. This part is known as the White Tower. It was the tallest building in London when it was completed in 1097. It's a keep, which means that it's the strongest part of the complex. It would have been the living accommodation for the most important people who were the royal family at that time. It's one of the largest keeps in the Christian world and the most complete 11th century palace in Europe. But the Tower of London contains much more than just the White Tower, although as you can see here, that is the heart of it. Surrounding it are sturdy walls and watchtowers. On the river, here we have Traitor's Gate, which is where prisoners would be brought upriver to be held in the Beauchamp Tower awaiting their executions. Most of them would be killed on nearby Tower Hill, outside of the walls of the Tower of London. But the more VIP prisoners, if you can call them that, would be executed inside the castle grounds. That was a slight concession. It was only actually granted to 7 people, 2 of whom were the wives of Henry VIII. Now, I don't know if you've noticed this red area around the castle. You're perhaps wondering what that is. Well, that was a temporary art exhibition that we had a few years ago. It was called Blood-Swept Lands and Seas of Red. And when you got close to it, you could see that actually those seas of red were made up of ceramic poppies. Each poppy represented a British or a colonial soldier who'd been killed in the First World War. There were more than 888,000 poppies. It was here in 2014. It marked the centenary of the start of that conflict. And it was inspirational, and I have to say it was deeply moving too. So there's a lot to see here at the Tower. You could really spend your whole day just in this one complex. You've got the royal armouries, the crown jewels are here with 23,000 gems set into them. The Wakefield Tower has been restored to how it would have looked